Now in part 3 of this solar singularity video, let me tell you a very personal story about this. Back in 1984, early 1984, I was 10 years old, and we had to write a paper in my 5th grade class about some aspect of future science aspiration. And I happened to be someone who was selected for this elite learning program known as the Able Learner program. So with my number 2 yellow Mongol pencil and my wide ruled sheets, remember in 5th grade you don't use college ruled sheets, you use wide ruled sheets of paper, I started writing my paper. I went to the library, and I was fortunate enough to be in an elementary school in some very, very average suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, where the library was unusually well stocked for just a K-6 school, because that building used to also have junior high students in there, grades 7 and 8, and therefore the library had a lot of books that were far too advanced for the K-6 students in that school. Even the 6th graders would not have made good use of all the hardcore reference material in my school's library. But I was the type of kid who could make use of that. So this was 1984, and I decided to research photovoltaic power. Why? Because in the early and mid 80s, people were getting these solar powered calculators where you could use a little calculator where the battery never had to be changed. You just had to have the calculator out in the sun for a certain amount of time, and then the calculator would be repowered. I found this very fascinating as a child, and I decided to make that the subject of my paper. So I went in the library and researched solar power, and we were told how to use the card catalog just a few months prior. I was probably the only 10-year-old kid who was ever going into these types of books that were not meant for children that were in 6th grade or lower. And I saw some detailed research material about photovoltaics, and in this reference textbook, they predicted that photovoltaic efficiency would keep rising at about 5% a year. And I did the calculation compounding. I didn't know how to do compounding arithmetic at that time. That told me that even from my 1984 perspective, by the decade of the 2020s, photovoltaic power would finally become efficient enough to supersede most other types of electricity. And therefore I predicted by the 2020s, which was in the very, very distant future from the perspective of a child in 1984. Remember, when you're 10 years old, even 3 months seems like a very long time. And I said, in the 2020s, this is going to be the output of photovoltaic electricity, and photovoltaic would be the big new type of electricity that generates all new electricity generation capacity by the end of the 2020s. Now this was a paper far more ambitious than what the other 5th graders were doing. And remember that it was written with a number 2 pencil on wide ruled paper, not even college ruled paper. And we were not allowed to use pens. Remember, that was the norm in US schools at the time. You cannot use pens, you can only use pencils. The paper was only about 5 pages long, but the teacher was impressed to the extent the teacher sent it to the principal, and the principal was under a little bit of pressure from the superintendent to show, well, who are the smart kids in your school and what output are they producing, and do you have a deliverable that you can show us, because the mayor of Cleveland would like to do a little photo op that features the up-and-coming bright students in the Cleveland area. The mayor of Cleveland at that time was George Voinovich, who later went on to become a US senator and the governor of Ohio. But when the school called my mother and said, on this date we're going to have a little photo op with the mayor of Cleveland, you can come to that, I was gathered up. I was just excited for 2 reasons, because I got half a day off of school because we were going to meet the mayor rather than just being in the classroom. And then the other kids who were there, we didn't understand what was going on, because the mayor was there for less time than we even noticed. The mayor was there for about 5 minutes. He came just for the photo op with the children and said hi to us a little bit. But as children, we didn't know that this would be important or that this person is an up-and-comer in US politics and so forth. We were just excited there were cookies there, because getting nice cookies for free was not something that happens every day when you're a child and you don't even know that cookies are bad for you. So we're happy about that. But my paper was among one of those selected by the school to be submitted to this broader contest where all the superintendents of the greater Cleveland Public School District gathered up good output from all the up-and-coming science-type children, and 10 or 12 of us got gathered up to do this photo op with the mayor of Cleveland for reasons that we, of course, could not have understood at that time. It was fun. And I tell this story because photovoltaics was my very first exponential technology, and I do mean very, very first. And I knew that this time would come. I've been waiting for this moment in photovoltaics for 40 years. 40 years I've been waiting for this moment. You might think he's not old enough to have waited 40 years for something, but as I told you, I was 10 years old when I first wrote about an exponential technology, and I first became attuned to the concept of an exponential technology, and finally this time has come. By the end of this decade, photovoltaics will generate nearly 100% of all net new electricity capacity added in the world, and it will be a huge lifeline economically for these poorer parts of the world, as we saw in part 2 of this 3-part series, because they are poor for reasons that actually have to do with coming from a warm climate and having too much sunlight. And now this disadvantage of the long-term evolutionary trend line is being corrected with the sunnier parts of the world more inherently positioned to take advantage of photovoltaics. The hottest, sunniest parts of the world are the poorest parts of the world, but they are soon going to be minting money with photovoltaics. At least some of them are. And this could correct one of the big unanswered questions in futurism, which is we can talk about a technological singularity and all, but what is going to happen to the bottom 2 or 3 billion people of the world? These are people who still don't have much electricity, they're still illiterate, they still have a poverty of aspirations. It has not been sold to them why they should pursue higher education, nor do they have the resources to do so. This could finally be a technology that breaks through that barrier, because the sunniest parts of the world are the ones most positioned to take advantage of photovoltaics, which is one of the primary technologies that can take us to a technological singularity. It's very, very high on the list of technologies needed to take us to a technological singularity. Now, I hope you found this 3-part series to be very enlightening, maybe even life-changing, I hope. But if you like this type of content, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel, and thank you very much for watching.